Hi, I'm Joe Scacciaferro, and this is On Location. All right, as always, I've always bring you somebody special. I bring it to you today is Dustin Seyler. Welcome, Dustin.
Hey Joe, what's up?
Hey, we met briefly towards the end of the NFL season, and we were doing a live post game show together. But as always, in those control rooms, we're kind of, even though we're close, it's sanctioned. There's all these different little cube areas that you work out of. And you were off to the distance, but I did get to watch. I did get to see what you were doing. At that point, you were basically a graphics producer, handling the live stream, all the graphics that were going up. You were keeping in with all of the stats that we had to do and what the producers were calling for during the show. So that's what I know you to be, but we've talked briefly, and you're so much more than that. So why don't you rattle off all the things that you've been doing, and then we'll kind of unpack each one as we go through it.
All right. So I'm technically like a video production freelancer. I go all the way from the east side of Pennsylvania all the way up to the north of New Jersey. Primarily, I like to divvy off kind of things either between like the fall and winter months and then the spring and the summer months. Because primarily I'm more into sports. So a lot of the fall and winter time, as you said, I'm with the Giants. I just started my first season with them. And as you said, I'm kind of like a, production coordinator, helping out with the graphics operator, making sure like that post-game show runs efficient, depending on what stats are needed to be in place, make sure that I'm in line with the producers as they, dictate their show and make sure everything's on top and flows pretty well. Also during this time, I'm working as a graphics operator over the New Jersey Devils with their Jumbotron crew. I've been there for about 3 years, going on to like a fourth season. It's hard to say, obviously, because the whole COVID years are kind of muddling a lot of like the normal time and place and stuff. But, I've been there having a good time, learning a lot from my boss, Joe, over there, and what he's done with their show and, what to bring for entertainment with those fans. As I get closer to home, where I'm over in Pennsylvania and stuff, I work at a couple colleges and stuff. Those roles with their video production departments for a lot of sports broadcasting stuff, even they're in multiple ways, like a camera operator, a replay operator, maybe like an audio or video technician, and just a couple minor roles just to keep my feet wet, obviously, during the year. And obviously, like during the summertime, when those things die down, I try to keep working or try to, relax a little bit, kind of just recharge my batteries here and there. Sometimes I'm like an audiovisual guy for a couple of bands locally in the area for some summer tours and stuff like that. And then, if I pick up some side gigs with my own stuff with, carrying on my camera and the rest of my gear, trying to do that as much as possible.
So you, as the rest of us in this industry, are multi-talented, and you do whatever you need to do to keep things moving. Would you say that diversity is a distraction? Or is that something that's actually become an asset to building your career?
I think it's an asset. When I was in college, they talked about the fact that you're going to probably be a person that's going to wear multiple hats and doing multiple things just to get in, the door. And I thought, all right, I might as well learn as much as I can. I was mainly focused on the tech side of things, but as I was finishing up my college time and entering, the real world and starting to do a couple jobs, I had to learn sometimes on myself, the creative end of things, or more of like the production realm, more like the pre-production elements there, just to get an idea of like, hey, you might be thrown to something like that, and you want to be prepared as much as you can. And with this type of industry, it's a sink or swim. So whatever I could do to not sink and be chewed up by all the sharks out there, I'm gonna do it.
It's so funny that word is thrown about. I've been in this a long time, and the way I describe it simply to people from the outside is it's a shark tank, and you just learn how to navigate in and out of the shark mouths and not get eaten. And I said, and just hopefully you never become one of them. And also make sure you turn your phones off when you go live on the air, because that would be number one. It's actually part of my job when I'm producing. Everybody, make sure your phones are off. We got to go. And here, I'm an idiot, and I didn't. So right. Let's keep it unpacking some of this. What's your passion? What's the thing you really enjoy doing most of?
So actually, I was at an AT&T store helping my dad get a new cell phone, and the kid that was there was a little bit younger. He was going into like media and digital design, and he asked me like, so you work in the live entertainment realm, like why do you do that? Like why not go into the film or television industry, or go into more broadcasting, or even with live entertainment go into like concert venue and stuff like that? And I said, well, I love the live element to it because it has this like high energy like moment that you don't get a lot in like broadcasting and television for sense. And a lot of it, like when I was in school, was focused on that. So I was like, okay, I did 4 years of that. I want to go out and venture to something different, maybe closer to sports, which was my like real like number one job, trying to get out of college and whatnot. But I just felt like with the energy and the excitement and trying to entertain a crowd, that could be there from coming to like the first game of like the season, or coming to see a sport for the first time in general, and not just from like watching on TV, was such like a magical moment. And then we also have that fan base that's been there season beyond season, even like when the team or whatever, like the arena that just like fully open like for the first time. So we have to keep creating new ideas to keep the crowd's entertainment and like showcase obviously the brand and stuff. And I just felt so passionate to work in that field and stuff. I got to meet a lot of people from different leagues and stuff like that. And a lot of that has led to the jobs that I keep going at. Like when we talked about the Giants job, the reason why I got it was because of another job I had, and the person who was there, she was a director and producer that I worked with, and we talked a little bit our backgrounds and stuff, and she said like, I work over at MedLife, and once in a while they'll need a new operator for graphics and stuff. Would that be interest to you? And I go, yeah. I always wanted to do football, and I always am grateful that because of going around and meeting new people and growing my network, it just seems that I get more opportunities to do stuff like that.
Okay, you hit every single point that I want to discuss, so that's great. But now I'm gonna force you to go a little deeper. Network is huge importance. That's something that you can't survive in this industry without. Maybe in just about any real industry vertical, you're going to need your community, your network of people. I want to back up a little bit. You started talking about the energy of live and the energy of being in those environments. That is something a lot of people actually stay away from. It's a do or die situation, and if you're not an adrenaline junkie, you can't do this, because you said it. You're amped up. You're in control rooms wherever they are, whether it's the event or whether it's broadcast. Those control rooms are not calm. Those control rooms are not mellow and everybody's doing their job and it's quiet. It's insanity. and it's controlled chaos is what, and I've been at it in a lot of positions. You're in a hot seat. The one spot you chose is one of the ones that has the biggest exposure rating, because you're being told, okay, we're going to put this stat up and this has got to go up, and you're looking at your sheets and you're looking at your stat sheets, you're listening to producers, you're communicating it to the operator, and there's a lot going on in the control room. And if the wrong number goes up, or if the wrong name goes up, or if something happens, it's instantaneously recognized, not even so much by the control room, which a lot of times it gets missed, but instantaneously it's out. And the fans, as you mentioned, are diehards, and they know more than we know. And they're hanging on every one of those graphics, more so than the words coming out of your broadcasters. So the position you've chosen is really the position of high exposure and high energy. And I that takes a personality. You seem to be a pretty calm, mellow guy. It's unusual that you would gravitate towards a position that is so under fire and so moving. Why? Why do you like that?
Probably the long answer to that is because I like doing that. I like torturing myself, and that's just how it is. But I take away the idea of, yes, I do get a lot of exposure of what I do and stuff like that, but obviously that's not important. The important thing is that I do my job correctly. If it's a producer or director saying, hey, we need a change on this going into the next segment, or hey, make sure to have this ready and stuff, I have to make sure I keep control of that. It's clock management, time management, it's making sure I check and double check, triple check spelling and stuff like that, where it's like, I have a flow of how I operate, and I got to make sure that I stay on task and aware, what's going on in real time in that sense. And sometimes, just repetition of that, I get more calmer that way. Obviously with certain shows that we have, rundowns and stuff like that are easier than shows that are like, off cup, where it's, hey, just listen to me and make it up as you go. And it's like, all right, well, I'll try my best, but don't blame me if something pops up and it's not what you like, because it's about the communication as well. You got to be on top of that. I know with, certain stuff, there's multiple producers or directors and stuff, and they're all, yapping about certain things and stuff. And, I just make sure to say, hey, I have it. Just call it when you're ready, and I'll shut up. Speak when obviously spoken to as much as you can.
Talk a little bit about, you said you have your checklist that you go through. Two questions. One, is that something you personally developed, or is that something you learned from somebody else, and this is what you have to do that position?
It's kind of a little bit of two things. It's one, just from past experiences, certain jobs, depending on, how much time I have, either pre-show or during the show and the stuff like that, just to see like, okay, what can I work on? What can I get ahead? What can I plan out and stuff? And, once it's like we're in the show time itself, it's more of like, okay, let's cross off these things as we go and just make sure that we activate them and, they look good, they feel good. If there's some talent, make sure that's, kind of backbooking them of what they speak on, and, make sure that it's easy for the fans to comprehend and go forth.
How do you, I didn't interrupt you, but how do you, because you're saying something, there's so many fascinating things coming out of your mouth, and I want to make sure I don't miss a lot of them. The skills, the talents, you're evolving what you're doing. And I say this all the time, in other industries, there's continuing ed programs. You want to learn something, you could go back and learn it. You know, there's not much of that in our business other than if you're an operator, manufacturers have some new, you know, I got a new widget, here's a program to learn the new widget. But how are you learning new skills and evolving it to the new, our industry changes rapidly. How do you keep yourself current and valuable with valuable skills?
It's kind of a mix. For one, I went into the route of getting like higher education just to have kind of a backbone or a baseline of understanding of, you know, how we do this stuff, from anything with cameras, editing programs, other gear, you know, going out in the field and stuff like that. But obviously once that time is done, you know, it's up to you to obviously turn, you know, experience into, you know, a career or work, and, you know, keep that going. Because it's always the curse where it's like, in order to get a job, you need experience, but in order to experience, you need to get a job, and it's hard to, you know, find yourself getting into that loop when you first start off. Like,
and how
for
do you
example,
get better? How do you how do you get better at what you're doing?
It's a lot of who you know, and it's a lot of just putting yourself out there and just going forth. Like also with my school, we are obligated in our senior year to do like an internship. Mm-hmm. But obviously, you know, sometimes that doesn't like fully mean like, hey, I'm going to get a job with them. It's just more or less, you know, growing my network and seeing what's out there, and then using it as a baseline to jump in maybe something completely different, something similar, or at least something that will get you to the next step up. And it's like almost walking on, you know, stepping stones until you get there. You know, and if you don't have that, you know, opportunity to go out into a field or work it, you know, it's on your own to teach that. Like with learning like non-linear editing and stuff like that, I see a lot of kids in the colleges, you know, being self-taught from just watching YouTube or something like that. And that wasn't like really a big thing like until I got out of school and stuff like that. And, you know, now they have like seminars and classes you can go, you know, learn and stuff like that to, you know, advance those skills and stuff. So that way you have, you know, that in your pocket and you're just ready to go. It's not just having just a piece of paper saying, hey, you know, I graduated from such and such place, give me a job. It's now like, hey, I have this piece of paper to say I know what it takes to learn something, and I've also now gotten the skill sets to obtain that. You know, please, find me and let's get the work done at that point.
Right. And post-production, graphics, there is a lot of that on YouTube. The rest of what we do, you can't find. There's no director YouTube. There's no producer YouTube. There's no EP YouTube. There's none of those skills. And the other thing is that there's no real path that shows you how to make those moves and how to do that. So those are on the job, those are industry. That's also what moves a lot of people out of our industry. Talented people who could have survived get lost in the woods, and then they just find their way back home, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, and it is sad to like see those who you go into school with and those that you continue to work with in the industry, because it seems like a lot of people I knew, like we come across each other and we bounce back from, you know, job to job here and there. But then there's some people who you feel like, wow, they're really good at something and it'd be great if they had a job in it, but they just seem to never pass through, you know, certain hiring loops or something like that, or, you know, they get beat out by someone else that might have more in like a certain other skill set on top of what they're asking for. And then, you know, they decide to go somewhere else completely different, you know. And I say, hey, you know, it's about determination and patience, and it is also a lot of luck too to, you know, get to where you want to be. You know, I tell people I didn't start off, you know, having like a full-time job right out of college. I had to wait a couple months, almost to like an entire year, to get something that I can at least say, hey, I'm here full time and I'm proud of it. And some people can't always do that. They have, obligations financially, or, they have their own personal things they're working on in the background that's not, maybe career ended or whatnot. And, they can't, hold on to that long. And it is what it
Yeah,
is.
no, you're absolutely. And honestly, I mean, and this isn't a pitch, but that is why I built Faro City, was for the, I don't know, 20 change, almost 30 years I've been knocking around in this world. The one thing that bothered me was how this industry removes people, how this industry doesn't allow people in. It is definitely an old boys network, and if you can't find your way into getting, a mentor or somebody to shepherd you through, it's almost impossible to kind of luck your way out. And we're in the metropolitan, we're in a hot spot where there's a lot of opportunity. You move out, into the center part of this country, move out into the global part of our industry. The jobs are small and far in between. So without having that community, which is what we built with Faro City, and without having people like yourself sharing your stories and getting people to hear, oh, okay, he did this and he did that. Those are really defining the path, because you don't get that in school. And if you don't go to school, you won't get any of this.
No, it's sad in some things. Like, obviously, I always tell my people that come to ask me about my job and stuff like that, like, was it beneficial that you went to school and stuff like that? I said, yeah. I said, I think it gave me a good insight of like how to connect to people, as well of like, obviously learning all this stuff.
Right.
And, to all like able to share stuff of what I do compared to like what other people do. And sometimes people just don't have that opportunity to get those connections right off the bat. They have to either find them on their own from like, square one. And it's just sometimes nearly impossible to do it. So I'm always grateful for like obviously making the connections as I go and making sure I continue to connect with people, around my age, if not younger, if they always need help, because I know that, I didn't necessarily get all the help that I needed when I first started. And if I could, help somebody get to their job or where they want to work at for the rest of their life, it's incredible. It feels so rewarding in that sense.
Okay, so you just signed up for Faro City, and we're going to put you in as a mentor program. Because you just told me you wanted to do that, so I have a place for you to be.
Yeah.
But yes, and there's more people with your attitude and with your concern than there are people who aren't. I've found that especially frontline production people, and not just in broadcast, but if you go to theater and if you go to music and if you go just about any creative presentation industry, you're going to find that the people who actually do the work, who do the jobs, have a passion for it, and also have a passion for the next generation coming in. And they all do want to give you a leg up. And you're evident of one of those. And you earlier spoke to community, which I'm actually circling back to, which is your network and your community, which you found to be critical to develop. As you're developing your skills, you need to develop your community and your network to advance what you're doing, and to give you that peripheral vision of what else you can do. And I want to jump down to some specifics. You mentioned in our conversations earlier, audio, that you've done, you've done audio. Now would seem to be a big deviation from what you're doing. Why and how did audio kind of creep into your world?
So when I was in high school, we had a stage crew department, that was in charge of anything in like our auditorium, for anything from events to musical plays or just special interviews or seminars and stuff like that. So I was in charge of making sure all the lights and all the audios for mics and stuff like that, or whatever feeds they had pumped into the speakers and stuff, was a go. And I always took that as a reference leading in towards this industry, because there's going to be a lot of nights and weekends that are just out of this world that, you know, you're going to be working, doing something, and it's just neat in that sense. And I still kept up with it for a couple of years. In town, there's like a local like summertime festival and stuff like that, where they have seminars, performances of, you know, the country-esque music and stuff like that. And we get a lot of different, you know, amateur to semi-professional like performers and stuff. So like working with them and seeing like all their talents and stuff and how they perform, and, you know, how to make that nice, crisp, like live sound for them is like a challenge I look, you know, into. And that's why I still keep doing it on the side, you know, get to meet all these performers and their experiences of being on tour or making music and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Like when I was still working at my full-time job, I had a side gig where I was working for like a IATSE stage builder company, union and whatnot. So sometimes when they had like a concert or something come into like a local venue nearby, I was helping build the stage and, you know, meeting professionals in that sense, you know, who are on tour with the artists or whatnot, or, you know, the guys and gals I'd be working with, you know, setting up different lighting, staging, video, audio, and all that stuff. And that was like a complete different, you know, type of job that I would do, you know, where I'd be sitting at home, maybe working on like an editing, you know, suite or something like that. It was working on my physical side instead of just the mental all the time. And it was just cool to be around that type of energy as well.
Yeah, you're spot on, buddy. Because just the way you talk about these gigs and stuff, you love what you do. I mean, and that is how sometimes we can get taken advantage of, because you don't do it for the money. You kind of do it because it's exciting and it's fulfilling, and it's camaraderie, and it's collaboration, and it's creative, and it's new, and it's exciting. All those challenges actually equate to dollars sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you do stuff because you love it. And you and I have a distance in age, and my personal overhead is probably a lot bigger than yours, but I still do that. I'll still take gigs for free because, oh, this is cool. I've never done this before. And I like being in those. And 2020 wiped me out. In my entire life, I had never not worked. I've always been doing something. No matter what, I've always worked. And the beginning of 2020 just crushed me. I didn't know what to do. I was completely at a loss, as were all my contemporaries.
Yeah. My 2020 was pretty much the same book. I remember it very easily because I was planning on actually going to take a trip out to Los Angeles, and we were talking at work at the Devils, thinking like, okay, you know, this is really serious now. It's starting to creep up in other countries in the world. It's actually likely it's going to be in the U.S. and, you know, we're just weighing it as a domino effect almost to see which sports league is going to start, you know, missing games or just canceling outright. And when the NBA did it, you know, it pretty much knocked NHL, because obviously a lot of those stadiums share same sports teams and stuff like that. And then I got calls from my university gigs and my other like opportunities and stuff, and everything was shut down. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. This is a once in a lifetime moment where I can decide of what I want to do. I took a local job down at a like a beverage and beer store close to where I at, because my uncle needed help, you know, making sure stuff that was delivered in was, you know, filed in properly, you know, cases of beer were stacked up and shelved, and, you know, just helping out customers when they buy alcohol and stuff, because obviously everyone was staying at home and they thought, hey, I need a beverage just to, you know, calm my head once in a while and keep things, you know, happy. So I did that for a little bit, and it was just like, wow, it's just odd that, you know, later on people just started to fizzle out, like parts of the industry that I knew and whatnot. Like I still haven't really worked, from like an IATSE stage build gig to concerts, even though now we are starting to do more live events and stuff like that, just because of how far I was and like the scale of like the totem pole of where I was with them. I just was left off completely. And, some people were in that same boat. They just lost their job and, their source of income, and they had to change. And, it's hard to swallow that in.
Oh yeah,
from
no,
taking yourself.
And from a point of, I mean, I carry crews up from 25 to 45, and we work pretty steadily, so there were always a rotation, but there was always big numbers, whether we were doing broadcast or whether we were doing concerts or whatever. And and obviously I have my first call lists, and those people, when that happened, even when it opened up again, it opened up with such a minimal restriction that a broadcast show that I could do where I could typically 25 people crewing, I was allowed 6. And the other people who got completely wiped out and still haven't been able to get back in are interns. There's no opportunity because they're the least allowed, because they're at least essential. So until we really get back to wide open again, those people are crippled, and I feel horrible for them, which again is Faro City, which is what we've been doing to try to make an opportunity. We're doing a deal right now with NYU with their intern outlets, just because there's not. We got good. We got really good. A couple of the guys I work with grasped that virtual world and figured it all out. They had close relationships with gamers on the technical side, so they were able to kludge a bunch of that gear and pull it all together, which gave us all a great opportunity. But yeah, it was an interesting time. Let me clarify one word you've been using: job. To the rest of the world, when you say job, they think, oh, 9 to 5, you go to work Monday through Friday, you have your benefits and you have your packages and you have all these other things because that's your job. And until something radical happens, that job exists. I'm assuming you're defining it a job as freelance gigs.
Yes. I would even go more in depth saying that a job is almost like it's like I always try to keep myself split into two, what's going on in my personal life and what's going on in my professional life. And obviously you have to have the time to seek that balance and stuff like that. And that's something that I am still figuring out, being young and stuff like that, that it's not like, my life is my job is my life, because that can lead towards very negative side effects and stuff like that, where that can really dampen you out, if not burn you out completely. And I always say, all these gigs are kind of like my job because, I'm not there, for entirety of like a long time. The 9 to 5 title, or, referring to other people's, things that they do for work or for money, that's not what we do. We're almost working all the time. Whenever
Right.
you're not at a physical place, you're at home working now with the whole, work from home hybrid stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if it's something where, they call you in last minute because someone else couldn't do a gig or something like that, you are the next man or next woman up to do it. So you have to be very flexible in order to do a lot of stuff. And I think, especially in the freelance realm, it's entirely necessary to be.
Oh, absolutely. I'm running a little bit out of time, but I do have one point you made before, and I want to go back to it because it's unique. You were talking about the show you're putting on for the fans, and the live event has an energy that is actually being emitted not just from the game, but from the atmosphere around them. When they're in the arena or they're in a stadium, they're being subjected to visuals, they're being subjected to audio, they're being subjected to graphics. And it has to tell a story like no other story. It's a very unique kind of evolution or kind of evolving story that's following the game, but sometimes it's actually setting the tone for the game. So explain when you get into those moments as a team, as a collaborative team. You're almost like a band in a nightclub that you're trying to get them up, get the fans up, get them partying, everybody dancing, right?
Yes, it's primarily like, sometimes it's igniting that energy from the start. Whenever, how the game is going on. The foremost, like that's something that we cannot control. The players of how they do or how well they don't do, that's going to be there. And we're just amplifying, as much energy as we can in those good moments to just, shoot for the stars. And then, if we have to crash back down for a little bit so that way we keep rising up and down. And a lot of that is just knowing of that environment and stuff. And, whatever, like, for instance, like hockey, obviously you have to know a little bit of how hockey is played and stuff like that. So, obviously when goals are scored, those are your high moments and stuff like that. But obviously there's going to be dips in the game for like television timeouts and stuff like that we have to keep the crowds engaged, looking and not, staring on their cell phones or, talking to other people or, going up to go to the bathroom or getting, some beers or something like that. We want to keep them focused. We want to keep them, entertained. We want to make sure that they're having a good time. Because some people might not be there just for the hockey game. Maybe they come because a friend had an extra ticket or something like that, or they're with like a corporate sponsorship that got invited. And, we want to make sure whoever is coming there is going to have a good time. And, we'll do whatever we can to succeed in that. And, that's just the nature of what we have to do. And that's what I really love doing.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, the fan experience. That's how sponsors sell it. That's how teams sell to sponsors, is the fan experience. That's how tickets get sold. You're rattling off all the real reason, the business behind the business is that fan experience. And people come. You said it. They may come to the game and don't even know the game.
Yeah, like it obviously. Obviously, the one thing like our departments is like we don't generate like money. Like we're not actually making money for the teams and stuff, but we're helping like those other departments, like the sales and ticketing, the sponsorships, making sure they get those promises and deals done, so that way the money is bringing in. So we do have an effect on that, and we want to make sure that that message or whatever they promise is clear and it's done correctly and it's done above expectations.
Yeah, perfect. Dustin, I would love to spend the rest of the afternoon talking to you. Unfortunately, I am running out of time, but this has been great. I've definitely, if you get the opportunity, love to have you back. We can extend the conversation as things start opening up more for you. And you're now an official member of Faro City's mentor program. You're great. All right, my friend. God bless.
Thank you, Joe.
Ciao. Talk to you soon.
You too. Yep.
Bye-bye.
See ya.